Hello, I'm Colin Green, and you are listening to Spike Pit, episode 91. Dungeons and Dragons, Moldvay, Mentzer, comparison.
Hey Colin, Froth here. Just wanted to let you know, I really enjoy hearing you reading the Mentzer D&D. It's not that I don't like it, but it makes it sound even better with you reading it. So I enjoyed that. I could listen to like an audiobook of that. So, all right, bye.
That's Froth from the Thought Eater podcast. Pick it up over on Anchor or all the usual places. I don't think we're in any danger of hearing a Spike Pit audiobook yet, but who knows, perhaps stay tuned. But no, joking aside, very kind of you to say so. Glad you enjoyed the reading.
Hello, Colin. This is Rob from Down in the Heat podcast. Thanks for listening, and thanks for the voicemails you've left for me. So good episode. I've played BX and haven't had much exposure to Mentzer, but for me, the big difference is the art, which is, I know, subjective, but for me, I like Errol Otis and those artists better than Larry Elmore. But there are some differences in the tables between the two. You notice differences between the saving throw tables to hit charts, thieving abilities, spells per day. They're all a little bit different. And I suspect that's largely because Mentzer had it going up to level 36 and Moldvay Cook stopped at 14th. But talk to you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. I'm enjoying Down in a Heap, and I like to call in to, contribute to the discussion, as people are always calling into my show, and this is another one where we hear the voice of the community, as it were. In particular, comments from MeWe in response to me asking, is it Moldvay or Mentzer, and what are your thoughts? We hear from quite a few people. And it's interesting that Rob mentions art. That crops up quite often. And it is surprisingly influential. It can definitely swing someone's preference purely because they prefer the art in one over the other. Another mention of the artwork comes, and not surprisingly perhaps, from Dyson Logos. I'm a BX man. It was a third edition of D&D I had played at that point, and it sold me as the smoothest of them. I was disappointed with the art changes from Moldvay to Mentzer and didn't like the two-book approach for the basic set. Larry Hout, friend of the show, commented on MeWe also. I ended up with both. Must say, Mentzer for learning the game using the split player and DM's books was more useful when getting new players into the game. Rich Franks has a fairly comprehensive comment. BX, I prefer the writing style. Also, while Mentzer's take on it purports to be being a better teaching tool of the game, I just don't believe it. The included paint-by-number stuff comes off as a little too condescending and means that a fairly sizable portion of the material is useless after you go through it. Moldvay does a better than adequate job of teaching the game and remains a solid reference after learning how to play. I've read the accounts of how the marching orders were to create a more approachable, kid-friendly version of the game, but honestly, when I was a kid, I was 11 when Moldvay came out, kid-friendly was the last thing I wanted. Hit me with the real stuff, lots of laughs. Even today, when my three boys each turned 8, I taught them how to play D&D with Moldvay Basic, and pretty quickly moved them onto AD&D.
Hey Colin, Che, Roleplay Rescue. Just on the subject of BX versus BECMI, I think there are two reasons I'm playing BX with the kids right now rather than BECMI. The first one is that I've got BX Essentials, and quite frankly, Gavin Norman has done such an awesome job of sorting it out, making it playable at the table, that how can I not use it? But also, I did notice, and I play Thieves when I play, which is not often, but I noticed that the Thieves are sort of worse off in BECMI than they are in BX, and so there's a little bit of a, gamer thing in me that I can see why people would go with BX. Anyway, hope that helps. Speak to you later.
Talking of BX Essentials, Gavin Norman had the following to say when he commented on MeWe, and I'll read it as he wrote it. As a kid, I had both, but preferred Mentzer, probably because it matched the other boxes in the series, which I also had, ECMI. Actually, I didn't have the Immortals set, so just ECM. Coming back to basics as an adult, I strongly preferred Moldvay. I think the main reasons were: the art is much more to my taste. I adore Elmore's AD&D book covers, some of my all-time favourite D&D art in fact. But his interior work in Beckme is way too clean-cut for me. I'm sure this was a conscious decision on the part of TSR. The hand-holding tone of Mentzer Basic is great for beginners, but is too much for experienced players.
Hi, Colin. I started with Holmes' Blue Book D&D, but I prefer Moldvay. I think that's a much better iteration of the rules. I don't know much about the difference between Moldvay and Mentzer, but the 4 items that were mentioned were all really good points of differences. In other words, I can't remember who you said prefers Mentzer for those 4 reasons, but I would also like to see changes in those 4 areas, especially the chase rules, which are kind of rubbish. That's one of the things I noticed when I was reading Gavin Norman's Basic Essentials, is that the chase rules underground in the dungeon and the chase rules in the wilderness are different for some reason. They have some differences, and I don't really love either one of them. But it's such a minor bit. It's the kind of thing you can change as the GM that I don't really see it as a flaw. All right, thanks for doing the comparison. I'm looking forward to hearing others' comments.
I'm not at all surprised to hear that Ray prefers Moldvay over Mentzer. It's probably, well, there's not much argument. It is the cleaner of the 2 rule sets, and Ray does like to cut to the chase. And talking of chases, sounds like some homework. Ray brought up the fact that he's not a lover of the chase rules, and I'm inclined to agree. I think they tend to be a little bit drawn out. Perhaps a homework assignment, as is Ray's way. He likes a homework assignment. I also like a homework assignment. So if you've got any further ideas, listeners, call in with alternative mechanisms for chases that either you use or you've heard about. Point us in the right direction. It's Matt Jackson. Mentzer, because that's the first thing I was ever exposed to. I never even knew Moldvay existed until I was older, and the OSR brought these games back to us. And the elusive man I can't seem to get a game with, Joe Salvador. I've gained a newfound respect for BX, especially Gavin's edit, but I started with Mentzer and some fond memories of those sets. That said, like you, Colin, Spike Pit Green, I never played it right, by the rules, so to speak. I'd like to go back and have a look at it with my old man eyes. I remember the solo scenario being excellent, and I don't think there has been anything so useful in any other edition. Let me know when you're running it. And you didn't seriously think Jason Hobbs wouldn't have something to say? He replied to Joe Salvador, "So, Mentzer isn't really BX, that's Beckme, and it doesn't hold a candle to BX." To which Joe Salvador replied, "I feel like the problems with Beckme came from the unnecessary bloat of the CMI sets. The basic and expert sets were great for someone starting out, at least that's how I remember it. I did use the mass combat stuff from Companion extensively in an AD&D game. I never played BX until your Kalmata game," meaning Jason's. The Hobster continues, "I learned on Holmes back in the day and shifted quickly to a mix of whatever we had. I've really attached to Moldvay in the last half decade or so." And his final comment, making it a Matt Jackson free-for, "Show me a game that does everything that BX does in as fewer words and is that simple." Caleb Collins writes, "Moldvay was the first D&D I ever owned, so I have a lot of feelings about BX. By the time Mentzer Basic was published, I'd moved on to AD&D and totally missed it. I honestly thought it was just new covers for the BX sets, for an embarrassingly long amount of time. Later, when I saw the contents, I found the tone patronising. At this late date, I prefer BX because it's more of a piece than Beckme. A BX halfling, maxed out at 8th level, can play alongside higher level characters, whereas Beckme has to do some pretty weird shit to keep the game advancing past expert. That, and it seems like Beckme was the introduction of gods who walk the earth as high level, rather than build your own stronghold and live in it. But that's just my own preference. Ian Engelbach had this to add. I played Advanced during the 1980s. When I went back to Basic Edition, I preferred the Rule Cyclopedia. So that's BECMI. Really, actually, BECM and no I. Thanks, Ian. I've just met Ian in a playtest with Gavin Norman for the new Advanced Classes book that's coming out anytime soon. We got halfway through the adventure and run out of time, so hopefully Ian will be able to make it to the next instalment and we can burn the place to the ground. Hugh Acton. My path was odd because my store had some really old new stock on the shelves. I was Black Box, just before Rule Cyclopedia. Cook Expert, Mentzer Companion, RC. I like Cook best of the bunch, so that put me in the Moldvay camp before I got Moldvay later. The art of Cook, the quirky cleric spell progression, thief skill progression, and the mention he makes of new skills and level titles, all gave it a charm the others lacked. I used and still love my RC, but Cook Expert is D&D to me. By the way, I came late to D&D. I started with MERP.
Hello, Colin. This is Carl from Save or Die and various other podcasting endeavors. I was calling about your basic D&D episode on the differences between BX and Beckme. And I wanted to offer a suggestion that you may like if you like some of the changes in Beckme. I think the major changes in Beckme are the thief skills, and also a lot of the spells are more defined. For example, sleep has an area of effect. One option for you may not have considered is the 91 basic set black box rulebook. It goes to level 5. It is Beckme rules and has all those definitions, but what it doesn't have is the intro starter dungeon, choose your own adventure stuff that kind of clutters up the red box book. So if you grab the black box rulebook and the Beckme expert set rulebook, you have 2 books going to level 14 using the Beckme rule set. Hope that helps. Bye.
Thank you, Carl, for calling in. Yeah, you're most famous to me for your talk about castles and crusades on the Crusader podcast, but I know you're a big D&D fan through the comments you make on the Audio Dungeon Discord. And this suggestion of yours caught my interest because the black box really passed me by. So I'll need to look into that further. It sounds like a nice option for sure. And John of Red Dice Diaries puts his hands up. To be honest, I'd be lying if I said I really knew the difference between them. But then again, I tend to draw from multiple OSR sources when running a D&D game. And I can tell you, John definitely knows what he's talking about. I'm playing in his new campaign. It's BX Essentials, and it's called 1,000 Lands. If you can, and you've got some time, have a listen. It's in all the usual places, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and I think it's going to develop nicely. We've got a couple of one main storyline going, and we're hooked into a little side mission at the moment. So that's really great. As you've heard then, quite a range of opinions. I think without taking too scientific an approach, BX has come out on top. Not really surprising, it is very popular. I'd like to thank everybody who's taken time to contribute to the discussion on MeWe. Thanks for the folks who've called in, and thanks to you, the listener. Much appreciated. If you've got anything further to add, I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation for a little while at least. Anyway, enough from me. Take care. I'll catch you later.